guys, welcome back to my channel, Simone here. So today I'm going to be doing my April wrap up, and I know it's a little bit late, it's kind of the middle of the month now, but basically I've decided that I want to do 2 videos a week now. I'm going to be doing them Wednesdays and Sundays. So I've been trying to kind of organise myself for the next few weeks. That's why there wasn't a video on Sunday. And it's also why this video is late, because it should have gone up on Sunday originally. This is just something I'm wanting to do. I really like filming and I feel like I want to put more content out there. So I hope that you like that. Let me know if you have any ideas of things that you want me to film, which I'm always happy to do. And without further ado, let's get into my April wrap up. So I read 10 books this month, technically 9 because one of the books I DNF'd. But I'll go into that a bit more in a moment. So the first book that I read this month was The Virgo Club by Suzanne Power, and this is a book that I've had on my shelves for ages. This book is about 4 women who all are Virgos, and twice a month they meet in their local Italian restaurant and they basically have dinner. And this is about the relationships that they all have. Each one of them has a kind of troubled relationship. And basically they decide together that each one of them is going to try and seduce one of the other's husband or partner, and then they're going to report back a few months later about whether or not they strayed or whether they didn't. It obviously is a very interesting book because not only are their relationships tested, but then their friendships are also tested because they're essentially trying to run off with each other's husbands. This book I liked. I gave this a 3-star. I would read more by Suzanne Power. I think this one is quite a chunky book, and I also felt like it was a lot of characters in each book, and it was quite overwhelming at times. There were so many different people to try and keep track of, and they would sort of mention one of the partners' names and I'd kind of have to look back and think which one was that. Luckily on the back there is a little kind of description of each one's sort of situation, so if you kind of forget who someone is you can kind of look on the back and find out, but that kind of took me out of the story a little bit doing that, so I did kind of lose a little bit of interest. But overall I really liked this. I thought it was an interesting premise, and I also loved the fact that it was set in Ireland because I went to Ireland last year and it was really interesting hearing names of places that I'd been. So yeah, I really liked this one. The second book that I read this month was The Cuckoo's Calling by Robert Galbraith, also known as J.K. Rowling, and I don't have this book at the moment because I borrowed this from the library, and this was a reread. This follows Cormoran Strike, who is a veteran of the army. He lost his leg in the army a few years before, and he's now working as a private detective. And a man comes to him, the brother of a successful model who has recently allegedly committed suicide, and basically the brother comes to him and says that he didn't think it was actually suicide, and asks him to investigate. This follows Cormoran Strike as he tries to find out what happens. It also follows his temp, who is Robin, who I absolutely adore. I think she's probably my favourite character in the whole book. I have, like I said, read this before, loved it then, still love it now. I gave this a 5-star. I think that the relationship between them is just really great. I think the whole thing generally is funny. Cormoran Strike, although not the most lovable person, is a really interesting character to read about, and I love J.K. Rowling's writing in general, so this was just another plus for me. I reread this because I actually own the second and third, and I'm really interested to read them. I wanted to reread the first before I continued on with the series, so now I'm free to do that, so I'm very excited. The third book is the one I read on my Kindle this month. It's the one I also DNF'd. I was not a big fan. It's The King of Taksim Square by Emran Serbs, I believe. This is a book about a guy whose younger sister is really talented, and she's a Michael Jackson impersonator. And he is trying to help her be successful in that, but at the time there is a big uprising, and the front pages are all about this uprising rather than about her, and so he tries to use that to his advantage to try and make her successful by using the uprising in it, kind of. I didn't read much of this book. It was really badly written in my opinion. just not a fan of the writing. I found it to be really contrived and just really messy, and I couldn't quite keep up with it. I didn't love it, and I definitely won't be reading any more of his books because it just wasn't for me. So I gave that a 1 star. The fourth book I read this month was The Children Act by Ian McEwan. I bought this book last year after I read Atonement, which I absolutely loved. It's one of my favourite books. This one intrigued me because, as some of you might know, I did law at university, and I really enjoyed it. And this book is about a High Court judge who presides over children and family law cases, basically. And this follows Fiona May, a High Court judge who is presiding over a case of a hospital who is trying to essentially make a young boy have treatment which he is not consenting to. Basically, he is a Jehovah's Witness, and they want him to have a blood transfusion, otherwise basically he's going to die, and he is not, he's not consenting to that. Basically, it's against his religion, and basically this is about the judge having to make that decision about it. This book, I feel like some people wouldn't like this because it is very law heavy, but for me that was really interesting because I did specialise in child law at university, so this was really interesting and exciting for me. It was almost like seeing what I learned kind of in practice, which I thought was really interesting. This book for me is definitely another one of Ian McEwan's which I think was very successful. I did think it got a little bit silly towards the end, hence why I gave it 4 stars and not 5, but generally I loved it, and I definitely am going to continue on reading more Ian McEwan books because I think that he's on the same wavelength as me. The next book I read was probably my favourite book this month, and that was Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I've talked a lot about my love for Rainbow Rowell, and I especially love Fangirl, which I read last year. This book is basically, Fangirl is about a girl who writes fan fiction about the Simon Snow series. This book is the fan fiction that she writes in that book in its own book. Basically, this is very much similar to a Harry Potter story, where the main character, Simon Snow, is kind of the chosen one, and he is having to try to figure it out. This is basically like book 7 of Harry Potter, but it's book 7 of Simon Snow instead. I adored this book. I thought I wasn't going to like it. I was kind of nervous to read it because I was a bit like, I don't know if this is going to be quite the same, like am I going to feel like it's a cheap version of Harry Potter, but I definitely didn't. I adored it. And yeah, I would definitely recommend. I've now read 3 Rainbow Rowell books and I've absolutely loved every single one and given them all 5 stars, so I definitely am going to pick up more from her. The next book I read was 44 Charles Street by Danielle Steele. Danielle Steele is one of my favourite authors. Generally, she's really good at writing such diverse books. Like, each book she writes is about something completely different. I've read books from her about the Vietnam War, I've read books about ballet dancers, I've read just so many different types, and this one follows a woman who, she's a gallery owner with her partner and they also live together, and then they break up, and she buys him out of the gallery and the house, and then she realises that she can't afford the payments on the house, so she has to move lodgers in basically, and she moves 3 people into the house who all bring something different. This book, I normally with Danielle Steele, although they're very well written and very well researched, they're not the most like shocking books. Like, I feel like they're often quite, they're really comfortable. That's how I would normally describe them. This book, there was a massive twist in this and I did not see it coming. My nan is the one who introduced me to this, so I rang her and I was like, Nan, I did not expect this to happen. And she sort of laughed and said that she didn't either when she read it, but she kind of understood where I was coming from, so it was nice to talk to her about it. This book, when you read it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and then there is so much in this, and I didn't expect it to hit home so much as it did. I loved it, absolutely loved it. I think I gave this a 5 star. Hold on, I'm reading off Goodreads as well. Yeah, I definitely gave this a 5 star. And one of my favourite Danielle Steele's. In fact, this might actually be my favourite Danielle Steele book I've ever read. Big claim, I know. But yeah, that's what I'm going to say. So this was the next one I read. Then I reread The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak this month. I don't have the book right now because my mum is actually borrowing it because she's wanted to read it for a long time, basically I decided to give it her. I do love The Book Thief, but I did give this a 3-star because for me I felt a little bit detached from the story. Basically this follows a young girl called Liesel who goes to live with a foster family in Germany when her parents are taken to a concentration camp in the Second World War, and this is actually narrated by death, which I think is the thing that I struggle with a little bit. I think it's interesting and it's a very good idea, but I don't know that it was necessarily executed 100%. For me, I find that I'm a little bit more distant from the characters because it's narrated by death. I find it a little bit difficult and a bit more sort of distant from them. I do really love it. I think it's a great book. I actually personally though, and I know this is probably going to be a bit shocking, but I really actually prefer the film. I think it's just an easier story to tell via film than it is by book. Don't get me wrong, love the book, just not as much as I love the film. I think that because I've read so many World War II books, I feel like this one doesn't really have what like The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna does, for example, which I absolutely adore, and it doesn't have quite all the same tick boxes for me. But either way, I would definitely recommend that you read it, and like I say, I've lent it to my mum, so I'm interested to find out what she thinks. Then I finally got around to reading my next Stephen King book, and I read 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This is one of my favourite books of all time. It's such a long book, so it is a little bit drawn out, but I did not get bored because every single page was like interesting and more information. Basically, this book follows a teacher called Jake who is essentially goes back in time through a porthole in his friend's diner and tries to, this is very much a brief summary, but is essentially trying to stop the assassination of JFK. And I'll be honest, I didn't really know a lot about the assassination of JFK. It wasn't really something I've ever really known too much about. I know that, you know, I know the kind of bare bones of it, but I really didn't know much. I didn't know there was so much controversy around it, about kind of did he do it by himself, did he do it with other people. I didn't know anything at all really, and so not only did I learn a lot about the whole situation, but it also was such an interesting and thrilling book to read. It's not one of Stephen King's sort of horror stories. I feel like I haven't really read one of them yet because I've read 2 and neither of them have been particularly scary. But this was definitely thrilling, and I absolutely loved it. And I think that if you're scared of reading Stephen King because you think that it's going to be too scary for you, definitely check this one out, because although it's a long book, it's not drawn out in kind of like, I don't think it could have been shorter. I feel like it needed to be that long in order to be what it was for me. So yeah, I love this book, and I definitely am going to I want to read more Stephen King. So give me recommendations below, which one should I read next? The penultimate book that I read this month was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, and this is one of the Chronicles of Narnia books. I'll be honest, I finished reading the 800-page Stephen King book and I just wanted something easy to read. This is like, I don't even think it's 200 pages, 203 pages long, and it's an old classic. Like, it's one of my favourite books from when I was a kid. And I honestly haven't read it in a long time, so yeah, I love this. I don't really feel like I need to go into too much detail. Most of you probably know what this is, but it follows a girl, it follows a family of 4 children who basically go through the back of a wardrobe and find a mysterious land called Narnia in the back. And yeah, it's amazing. I've also have the others to read, so I'm hoping to get to them fairly soon. And the last book that I read this month is Summer Boys by Hayley Abbott, and this is a young adult book that I picked randomly from the library. It's not even one I'd ever heard of before. I just picked it up because I wanted to read something and I thought I wanted to try somebody new. This is a book about first loves, and it follows 3 girls who are on holiday kind of all as a big group of people over the summer. They stay kind of in this big beach house thing, and it's about their experiences. So One of them is in love with her sister's boyfriend. One of them is starting to get feelings for her best friend, but doesn't quite know how to say it. And one of them thought that she was in a relationship, but the guy that she's in a relationship with, long distance, is very distant, and it's a bit awkward, so she doesn't quite know how to deal with it. So it's about first loves, it's about relationships, and I really liked this. I gave it a 4-star. It was slightly juvenile in some places, and I struggled with some of the kind of consent things. There was one of the girl who's in love with her sister's boyfriend I personally think that it kind of blurred the lines of consent and whether or not that was okay. That was just a personal thing, but I did really enjoy it. There is another 3 in the series, I think, so I might continue and see what I think about the next one. But yeah, so they are the books that I read this month. Let me know what you read this month. I'd be really interested to know. Have you read any of the books I read, and what did you think? Leave comments below. I'd love to talk to you all. Give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you on Sunday. Bye guys!